Hi, everyone.
Happy Wednesday. We'll wait just a few minutes and let all of you join us before we get started.
If you're joining, say hi. Tell us where you're watching from. There we go. Hi, Ricky. Katie.
Linda.
Candace.
Judy. People from all over.
We've got Colorado, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma.
Maddie is with us.
Clay Center. Just down the road. There we go. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a special guest with us today. We have Judy Abel with us, and she's from Toklot, and she is going to talk with us today about how to transition your horse to a new bit.
If you have any questions, please get those in the comments. At the end of the segment, one lucky viewer will win a Myler bit of their choice and a consult with Dale Myler. So make sure if you have any questions, get those in there or just tell us hello. And with that, Judy, we're going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks for having me again, guys. It's been a couple of years, I think, since I did my last Myler talk with you. So the topic today is how to transition to a new bit. So for those of you who are watching, if you haven't watched the other videos, we talked more about like Myler and how it works and all of that, and what the philosophy is. In the other videos I did for Valley Vets, you can find those on their Facebook page. But today is kind of more of a broad-based topic on how to transition to a bit. It's not really about a specific brand. It's one of those things that as a horse owner, I'm very guilty of getting new bits and then just putting it on my horse and going out for a ride. Like just not like no transition. So I learned from Dale and Ron and Bob, that's probably not the best approach. The whole point to transitioning is to give your horse an opportunity to adapt to the change. So horses are very much like people. They don't like change. They like the thing that they know. Even if the thing that they know causes them discomfort or unhappiness, they would rather have the thing that they know that causes them discomfort and happiness than the thing they don't know that could possibly be better for them. And it's the transition process is basically the persuasion process where you as the rider are convincing them that this change is for the better. And so you need to give them that opportunity to kind of wrap their heads around the change that you've made. Now, the times when you don't really have to worry too much about actually transitioning, for us in Myler, it's all about the mouthpiece. So honestly, if you're going from a D with a single joint to an egg butt with a single joint for your horse, that is the same bit. So there's no transition necessary there because it's just the same bit. It's a lateral move. You're not changing any of the conditions the horse is used to operating under. So the mouthpiece is still going to break and apply tongue pressure. It's still going to act the same across. It doesn't matter what the cheek piece is. It's still going to act the same in the horse's mouth. So that's the time when you don't really have to worry about a transition. And that holds true if it's a single joint going to a French link, or a single joint to a dog bone, or a dog bone to a lozenge bit. all of those bits are basically the same mouthpiece and they operate the same. And so the horse is not going to notice that much difference. But if you've put some time into your horse's bit selection and you've made a good change trying to stop using the tongue as a pressure point, and you're trying to use other pressure points. So you've gone from a broken mouthpiece like a single joint to, which would be something, you know, like this is a Myler version of a single joint. So you pick it up in the middle, it breaks, it's going to apply tongue pressure, to something that doesn't break and will not rotate down onto the tongue. Well, you've gone to a bit that has some give to it, to a bit that is essentially a solid bar. And that's a completely different feel. And then depending on the change that you've made, if you've gone to a little bit more of a dramatic change, trying to get your horse more tongue relief, that horse has to come to grips with the change in expectation, like what's happening to him every time you touch the reins. So one thing that's really interesting about horses is they remember the last thing that happened to them. So if you have had your horse in a standard single joint or French link or dog bone for years, like for a long time, and you came across the Valley Vet Facebook page and you watched the videos and you've picked a different bit, whether it's a Myler or something else, and you want to make this change, your horse is expecting when you touch the reins for the same thing to happen that's happened every time you've touched the reins for the last however many years. So I think we all know as horse owners that it's really dangerous to set a horse up with uncertain expectations, because when they don't know what's going to happen, that's when they tend to overreact to things. And so, because they're a prey animal, so they're flight or fight, and they tend to err on the side of flight. So the whole transition process is about managing through that and giving your horse the best opportunity to figure out what's going on and how to respond appropriately. So the first step in making sure you're in the transition process is to make sure that you've got the bit adjusted properly in the bridle. Sounds stupid, but if you are going from a ring bit to a shank bit, for example, like this, you can't assume that the adjustment's going to be the same. So the first thing you have to do is make sure you get the bit adjusted properly and spend some time getting it adjusted properly on the bridle. If you have a curb strap, then make sure that the curb strap is adjusted appropriately for the bit that you're using. So for us, if there's a curb strap involved, whether it's like a Myler cheek like this that has it's the modified snaffle cheek, you know, whether it's this or it's a shank bit with a curb strap on it, we like to see when you pull back on the rein, if the cheek has to move more than, say, an inch to an inch and a quarter rotation before the curb engages, then the curb strap or the chain is too loose. So make sure you kind of spend some time getting the curb adjusted appropriately for the bit that you're using. And then you can always fine tune it once you get started, but don't just throw it on there and put it on the same way you've put it on every other bit that you've used. You know, spend some time. It's, you know, at the end of the day, as the human in this relationship, you have the opposable thumb and you have the giant brain. So it's kind of on you to figure out these details for your horse so that you can help him manage through that. So make sure all of those things are adjusted properly. Then when you are going to use the bit, I recommend that you spend some time on the ground first. And this is a safety issue, but it also is an educational opportunity for you. So from the ground, before you get on, you bridle up your horse, maybe give him 5 minutes to kind of get the feel of the bit, 5 or 10 minutes. You'll know your horse. Like if your horse tends to be a little neurotic and a little insecure, then give him a little longer to kind of figure out what's going on in his mouth. It'll taste different. It'll feel different. If your horse is pretty steady Eddie and is pretty easy going, then it might only be a few minutes, but still give him that. Don't take advantage of that easygoing nature. Still give him that time to kind of get the feel of it. And then before you ever get in the saddle, stand next to your horse, look him eye to eye, and you can just lift the rein at the wither as though you were in the saddle. Lift the rein until you get contact. Hold the contact. Don't poke at him. No poking. Just hold that contact. And he might fuss with the bit. He might, I don't know what's going on here. Go above the bit. He might step backwards a little bit because he's not sure. But as soon as he breaks at the pole and flexes, release. Like really exaggerate that release. and tell him he's a good boy or a good girl. And then do that on each side until your horse is flexing and releasing like in a comfortable way before you ever get in the saddle. So we call that the vertical flexion. You can do some lateral flexion. So lateral flexion is when you take the rein and you move it out as though you're asking your horse to turn his head. I don't do a lot of lateral flexion because I made this mistake early on when my horses were young. And I think a lot of people do it. The lateral flexion is kind of like the sit for a dog. We overtrain on it. Like we've been told the lateral flexion is the suppling, so we do it to death. And so I just don't spend a lot of time on it because horses are just like really too ready to swing that head around. And some people, you know, if you've given your horse treats for doing that to get them to supple, then they're just going to be woo, woo, woo. And there's not a lot of value in it as far as transitioning to a new bit. But you know, do it a little bit, but I would focus on that vertical flexion because that's when you're asking your horse to give to the rein aid and asking him to flex at the hole. And I would do those exercises pretty religiously from the ground before you start every ride. Ideally, if you're going to transition, it would be great to do it in an enclosed environment, not sitting out in the middle of a trailhead that's wide open where you aren't sure and you've got friends milling around with other horses and you're getting ready to go on a 4-hour trail ride, or you're getting ready to, like, God forbid, go into an actual show ring to do something with your horse in a brand new bit. So ideally, if you could do it in a quiet place where you can focus on it and not be in a rush and not have a lot of other external pressure, to evaluate how your horse responds to the bit from the ground, that is ideal. That is optimal, and it's the fairest opportunity for your horse. And from the ground, it's also your job to evaluate how your horse responds to the bit. So what we're looking for, and this is a question that we get quite a bit, is like, how do I know if my horse likes the bit? So the bit is your communication tool. It's a piece of metal. It's in his mouth or her mouth. And there's not a whole lot of liking or not liking. There's accepting and understanding, or not accepting and not understanding. And there's always going to be a little bit of that when you first start using a completely different kind of bit for your horse. So at the end of the day, you want to look for, like, over the course of doing that groundwork with the vertical flexion and a little bit of lateral, you want to see the horse readily coming to the bit. And you want to see, you know, there might be a little anxiety. You want to see that anxiety abate after a couple minutes. And you want to see a soft eye, a forward ear, and a quiet tail. And so that's kind of the indication that, oh, okay, I kind of get what's going on. And you need to do it from both sides of the horse independently. So work both sides, because some horses are left-handed, right-handed. And so they need to have that equal time spent on each side. And especially if you're going from a bit that doesn't have independent side movement. So like on a Myler and some other brands of bits, there might be a mechanism in the middle. We have a barrel that acts as a bushing that lets each side move independently. If you're going from a single joint to a bit like this, then working from each side is going to help the horse understand that, you know, when I touch the rein, it doesn't move the whole bit. Things don't lock up. It feels different. So it's really important to work that exercise from the ground, from each side, until you feel comfortable looking at your horse in the eye that your horse is ready, and that your horse is responding appropriately. Then when you mount up, do the same thing. You just ask from the saddle. You ask for the vertical flexion from each side, and then before you even start moving, do that for a couple minutes. And if everything's relaxed and everything's comfortable, then you can start doing your normal warm-up, your normal process for getting ready to do something with your horse. And in that first initial ride, you know, looking for symptoms like what's happening. So looking for that soft eye, looking for the ear forward, the tail that's quiet, and then looking for the horse, you know, responding to the rein aid. I always do it like I'm actually but looking for a horse responding to the rein aid in a relaxed fashion. So the bit can only do one of two things. It can cause resistance, or it can encourage relaxation. So clearly what we're after is relaxation. You might not get it the first time, just because, like I said, horses don't like change, and your horse could spend the 40 minutes that you're going to ride, you know, in an arena fussing with the bit, going, I don't know what this is. Why is it doing this? Why is it moving on this side and not that side? I don't understand what you're asking. What's going on? There's just so much. I can't handle it. Some horses, like just like that, figure it out and they're totally cool with it, and they start working and they work hard and they get it down. But every horse, just like kids in a classroom, every horse learns differently and every horse responds a little bit differently. So you have to be patient. And back to the, you're the rider and you're the manager, you're responsible for this environment and you're responsible for this experience your horse is having. So it is on you to, understand and trust what your horse is telling you. So you might see a little fussiness and you might see a little confusion, but that's okay. If you can work through it and you get like 45 minutes into a lesson and you come out the other end and you've had some good work, then you need to do it again. And we typically would say that you need to use a completely different bit. We would say you need to use that bit probably 5 or 6 rides, your normal rides, before you figure out if it's actually going to work for your horse. Because that it can take that long for them to trust every time you bridle them up, they're going to have this new experience. And that new experience is better than the old experience, because there's no other reason to change the bit. Why don't change the bit if you don't have to change the bit? So if you're changing your bit, then there's something that you're trying to accomplish. You're either addressing some kind of bit resistance that your horse has been going through, like every time you touch the rein, his nose goes up, tucks to his chest, or he opens his mouth, he roots down, runs through the bit, throws his tongue over the bit. That behavior in particular, you're not going to see a huge change until you've had a lot of time on a new bit, because that behavior is specifically really hard to address. It's really hard to break that habit. But the other signs of resistance that you may have experienced before that caused you to change the bit, you should see those, if not immediately disappear, you should see them, abate. They should start to diminish if you have made the change in a way that is, freeing up your horse's tongue and not using the tongue as a primary pressure point. Because that's always the goal, is to always work towards giving the horse more responsibility and freedom and using the tongue less as a pressure point and using other parts of his head, bar, lip, poll, chin, as a pressure point instead of the tongue, because the tongue is the thing that causes the resistance. So the transition process is about letting the horse figure out that you have actually made that change and you are actually giving him some freedom. So with horses, sometimes they don't know what to do with the freedom, right? So they kind of like, like a teenager, you hand them the keys to the car and say, you can drive to the store right now. Some kids are all over that. They're like, zoom, gone. You just hand them the key and all you hear is peeling out of the driveway. Some kids are like, I do not want to do that yet. I don't want, Mom, drive me there. Dad, drive me there, because I don't feel confident driving in traffic yet. Or I have to get on a highway to go there and I don't feel up to that. Horses are the same way. Sometimes the structure is the thing that they depend on, and they depend on you. And so you have to just let them learn and trust that the experience they're having is better for them. And they should see that after 5 or 6 rides, maybe a little longer. But it is also your responsibility to manage through like how that horse's process is working. So for example, I did a clinic with Dale once, it was a while ago now, in New Zealand. And this is a little anecdote that I share once in a while. It was a rescue horse. It was an Arabian. The woman that came in on the horse was part of the rescue. This horse was wound up, super insecure. I have Arabs, and so I recognized right away, like rolling eyes, sweated up, head up in the air, just super, super stressed. And, I was off doing something else. I think I was doing a tack change for another horse. And I looked over and Dale had talked to the woman and he had picked out a bit and they'd made the switch. And I looked over again a few minutes later and I saw this really anxious horse going around, surprisingly relaxed. Like, it was pretty dramatic. And I was like, oh, yay, that worked. And so I kept doing what I was doing. And then I happened to hear the woman say, she was a really nice woman, but she was like, I can't ride this horse. I can't feel anything. And so what had basically happened is she'd gotten so used to that horse's high-headedness, like on the rein all the time, like on the bit all the time, pulling, and she was pulling, that when that horse was flexed and comfortable and not resisting the bit, she didn't know what to do with herself. Like she did not know how to give that horse guidance. And it is that, for me, it always spoke to the responsibility of the rider in this whole bitting process and the whole transition process. If the horse was clearly in a much better mental frame of mind, the horse was much more relaxed, that it is the rider's job to figure out how to ride that horse. Like she ended up putting it back in the same bit that she'd had it in before, and it went back to being really insecure and strung out and stressed because she could ride it better. She felt more comfortable riding it. And for me, that was the opposite. What needed to happen was she needed to figure out how to ride the horse now that it could relax into the bridle and could be relaxed on the rein. And I was sad. And so that, for me, that really speaks to what all riders, like your level of responsibility is really high. It's not just throw the bit on, and if my horse doesn't kill me, he likes it. Or if my horse, I put the bit on and my horse jumps around and flails around and mouths it, he doesn't like it, and I take it off and put his other bit on. That's not how you manage through the whole transition process. Whatever the brand of bit or the type of bit you have, it's like if you feel like you've made a good conscious decision to kind of give this horse a better experience, then you have to manage through that. So that is, for me, the sum total of the whole bit transition. So does that make sense? That was a lot of talking. Well, like all you do is push the button and I'm going. So yeah, I don't know if there's any questions about the process or how you, like, what do you do, I guess, if it doesn't work? You ride it 5 or 6 times. That might be the case, right? So especially if you're at home and you're watching videos and trying to make a good decision and you get a bit, sometimes it's not the right bit. Sometimes there's a little tweaking that has to happen, and that does happen. Basically, you always want to work towards less tongue pressure. You want to work towards tongue relief. Again, whatever the bit is, you could have a bucket of bits at home, and you can just sprinkle them all out. And, like I said, watch the videos that we did for Valley Vet before on mouthpieces and how that tongue pressure, tongue relief works, and try to make a good decision. But you don't know until you actually try it and actually go through the process. So that, I would say, that is the big caution, is that sometimes it's not the right bit. I would say if you've made a conscious effort, then a lot of times it is, and the horse just needs time to acclimate to it. So, yeah.
We don't have a question about the transition, but we do about a bit. Christina asked, what is the purpose or difference between a level 2 low port comfort snaffle and a level 1 snaffle with a roller?
It's a good question.
My mare is very oral and experiences the world with her mouth and her tongue, so I went with the snaffle with the roller, walker with copper.
Yeah. So this is the level 1 with the copper roller. It's reverse. It's called the 03 mouthpiece, and as you can see, it goes straight across, right? So we consider it to be level 1 because level 1 in Myler applies maximum tongue pressure. So it's your single joints, your dog bones, your lozenges, your French links, the 03, the 02 Myler. Those are all level 1, maximum tongue pressure, no tongue relief. That's what it looks like. So the low port comfort snaffle, which is the level 2 mouthpiece, looks like this. So you can see it's got the same barrel in the center, but you can see that there's this little port right here. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. And that little port is what gives the tongue relief. So they both break when you pick them up in the middle. So if you pick these bits up, they both break in the middle. So they're both going to rotate down onto the tongue. But the difference between the 03 and the 04 is that the 04 actually gives a little bit of tongue relief. So for us, very few horses need a level 1 mouthpiece, and that includes Myler mouthpieces, the ones we make. No horse needs this level of tongue pressure with no tongue relief. So if you were starting a young horse, the lowest we would go is we would start with level 2. So we would start with this level 2 mouthpiece because it does the same thing as level 1. It collapses, it applies tongue pressure, but it will introduce the concept of some tongue relief and let the horse move its tongue under the bit. Now, a lot of people buy this mouthpiece because of this copper roller. And I always joke and say, we make the copper roller for the people. We don't really make it for the horses because people love this copper roller. It's great. It does encourage salivation. But at the end of the day, if a horse is bitted properly, then they typically don't need the copper roller. However, and I don't have one here to show, unfortunately. Oh, yeah, I do. We finally gave in because people love the copper roller. And we added the copper roller to a couple other mouthpieces. So now you can get that 04 mouthpiece with the copper roller. So it's got the tongue relief, but it's got the copper roller if you really like the copper roller. And it's really pretty bit. So, and then we added it also in a level 3 mouthpiece. So this has got a little copper roller at the top as well. They still have the independent side movement. But now if you like copper rollers, you feel like your horse needs the copper roller, that you can get that copper roller in some bits that are a little bit better for the horse in general. So good question.
Okay, this one's from Linda. Is the ported barrel bit articulated so that each side moves independently?
Well, ported barrel bit can apply to pretty much almost everything we make. If it has a barrel in the center, then yes, that barrel is actually a bushing. It's not a roller. It won't roll very easily like with the horse's tongue. But yes, it is there to let each side of the bit move independently of the other. And that gives you really good shoulder control. It gives you really good vertical and lateral flexion, a really precise rein aid versus a bit that locks up and moves all at once. So in any cheek piece. However, it is like this is the same mouthpiece in an egg butt. If it's in a ring bit like this or a loose ring, when you pull back on the rein slides to the point of least resistance, and you can't really use the independent side movement as effectively as you can if the rein is actually fixed on the cheek piece, either in a shank bit like this or in the modified ring bit that I had earlier, this egg butt. We also do it in the D and the Western D, where you can buckle the bridle here, buckle the rein here. It will slide, but it'll stop just below the mouthpiece and cause it to rotate. So it actually gives you the same benefit of fixing it on a shank, but without the leverage that a shank gives you. So that would enable you to use the independent side movement on the ring bit. Did that answer that question? I feel like I over-answered that question. That is my way.
All right. Cindy said, so what's your recommendation moving from an O-ring snaffle with a single joint to a bit that I can ride one-handed so I can start roping? He's 6 and pretty broke.
Yeah, I would say that there's no one bit, but the way that we approach bitting is we try to bit for as much tongue relief as your horse can mentally handle. So we categorize all the mouthpieces into levels. Level 1 being, as I said, maximum tongue pressure, up to level 3, which is maximum tongue relief. And there's a whole range in the middle. And so in order to figure out where your horse falls in that range, the questions that I would ask you about your horse would be, number 1, his disposition. So on one end, he's like, there's the super flighty, anxious horse. On the other end, there's the super bold, dominant, challenging horse. And then somewhere in the middle, there's just the good girl, the good boy, steady, trustworthy, even-tempered, willing. And the closer to the center, the more tongue relief that horse deserves. The farther you get out to those extremes, the more management the horse. It's not that they need more tongue pressure, they just need more management, and they aren't maybe ready for as much freedom. So the bold horse is going to take advantage, and the flighty, anxious horse is probably going to become highly neurotic in the absence of structure and management. So the closer to the center, the more tongue relief that horse deserves. And if the horse is pretty broke, meaning he's trustworthy in all scenarios, he knows his job technically, he is really solid and consistent as a performer, then he's going to definitely be closer to a level 3 horse, like level 3 or high level 2-3, and those categories of mouthpieces. So an example of a level 3 mouthpiece would be, this is the 33 mouthpiece, the newer one with the copper roller, but it has a port that allows complete tongue relief with little to no tongue pressure. So the horse that is going in this bit is given complete freedom. Like you can haul on this with a curb strap, and all you're going to do is get a little pull pressure, a little curb pressure, a little bar lip pressure, but you're not going to get any tongue pressure whatsoever. So the horse that goes in this is a horse that doesn't take advantage, and he's riding off your seat and your legs, and he's really, really honest and knows his job. If he's less than that, he's not perfect. He's still learning. He's only 6, for example. Then probably in the level 2-3 category, you're going to look for, I can find a couple examples. We're going to look for, one moment, please. These are 2 extremes of the level 2-3. So at the bottom of level 2-3, and again, ignore the cheek piece. It's nothing to do with the cheek piece. This is what we call the 06 mouthpiece, and it's very similar to the 04 mouthpiece I showed you with the little port. The difference is this doesn't collapse. So it's basically a ported mullen. So it's a straight bar bit with some tongue relief, but very minimal. So it's on the low end of level 2-3. And then the other end, at the top end of level 2-3, this is the 43 low port. So it's got the port. It's not high enough for palate pressure, but it is enough for tongue pressure. It's a little narrow down here, so when you pull back on the reins, it puts a little pressure on the outside edges of the tongue. And so it's one step below level 3. I've always said if a horse can go in this mouthpiece, it can go in a level 3 mouthpiece. There's just not a lot of difference between the 2. And so those are the opposite ends of level 2-3. And then in the middle, there is a couple of options. This is the 36, still a solid mouthpiece, doesn't collapse, but the port is tipped forward at a 45-degree angle. So there's a ton of tongue relief behind the bit, but when you pull back on both reins, this can actually apply some tongue pressure. It's not as much tongue pressure as a level 1 or a level 2 mouthpiece, but it's a nice mouthpiece. The 36 is a really nice mouthpiece for a horse that is super steady, super honest, but still needs some management without being overhandled. And then the cheek piece is whatever works for whatever you're doing. So that's a solid mouthpiece. And then within level 2-3, we have a pretty big category of correctionals. So correctional is a ported mouth that allows tongue relief, but also collapses. So correctionals are designed to fix a problem. They're super popular in roping and reining because they can apply the tongue pressure. This applies a lot of tongue pressure. It's a pretty strong bit and it's very fast. Like there's no, as soon as you touch the reins, this thing is applying all the tongue pressure. And with this kind of shank on it, it's a really strong tongue pressure. So it's a very quick correctional. We have some other correctionals that are a little slower, a little more delayed, a little softer, like rounded here. I think I have one actually. Looks like this. This doesn't have the independent side movement, but it's a correctional. It collapses, and it will apply a pretty steady pressure on the outside edges of the tongue, but it's rounded, so it's not a concentrated pressure. So there's a whole category of correctionals within level 2-3 that might be appropriate for roping. Like roping is a quick sport, but it's a precise sport. And so the correctionals are sometimes the best approach, but I wouldn't just go out and buy a rando correctional. I mean, I kind of go through the process. And if you need help, like more specific help, you can get hooked up. You can just call Dale or Bob. And Bob especially does cowboy mounted shooting. So very well versed in the ways of the speed sports and the precision and that sort of thing. And they can help you with like fine tuning that selection process.
Okay. Beth had asked, do all of your bits come larger than 5 inches wide or only certain styles?
Only certain styles, but there are quite a few now. So over the last 15 years, whenever we've added bits, like we went through with English bits, we went through a whole dressage legal process. When we added new bits for that, we added a lot of 6-inch, 5.5-inch bits. In Western, we had a lot of people riding draft horses, draft crosses, bigger horses, sometimes just walking horses with bigger heads. And so we do have, in some styles, we go 5.5 and we go 6, but not in every style. Because honestly, we already have like 400 part numbers. So if we added sizes, we would have 700 and we probably wouldn't sell a ton of them. But we have all the ones that people have asked us for. We have added those bigger sizes.
Lori asked, what's the best bit to start a colt?
For starting, so the reason that you have broken bits to begin with, like a single joint, is because when you start a young horse, the best place to apply pressure to teach the rein aid is the tongue. So the tongue is a big, thick muscle, and it's connected to that. See, this has turned into a Myler talk. Always does. It's a big, thick muscle that's connected to the neck, the shoulders, and the back. And when you apply pressure to it, it creates a situation where the horse can't go forward. So the horse has to give to the pressure until you release. So when you want to start a young horse, you want a bit that is going to apply that tongue pressure, but also give them some kind of tongue relief. And that is where the 04, in whatever, we make it literally in every cheek piece. The 04 mouthpiece is going to be the optimal starting of a young horse mouthpiece, because it is the one that breaks, rotates down onto the tongue, but introduces a little bit of tongue pressure. So the thing to remember, though, is when you start a horse, the tongue is the place you want to apply the pressure to teach them to give to the rein aid. But once they know how to do that, that's when you need to start thinking about changing out that mouthpiece. So the danger is that it works really well and you continue to use it because it worked really well, and you start ignoring the signs that it's not working anymore. Because as a horse starts to learn, they're going to start to demand more tongue relief. And that's where the signs of resistance come in. So if you start to see going above the bit, going behind the bit, rooting down, throwing the head around, mouth open, tongue, any one of those or all of them, some horses are super dramatic about everything, then that is telling you that it's not just bad behavior. It's actually a sign that the horse needs more tongue relief for the things that you're trying to teach him. So if you think of the bit as a communication tool, and the communication tool has a finite usefulness, just like the analogy I always use is when you have a child in school, when they start kindergarten and you give them a book to teach them how to read, you don't give them that book and then say you're good till senior high. Like that book is going to be exhausted in a very short amount of time. They're going to learn what they need from that book really quickly, and then they're going to need the next tool and the next tool and the next tool. And as they grow in their education, the tools become more sophisticated and more complex, and they last longer because it takes longer to understand them and to achieve what you need to with each tool, until you end up in high school with bigger textbooks that have a lot more information packed into them. The bit is just like that. It's just a communication device that educates your horse. And so recognize it as a tool that is going to have to be changed at some point. And that is the thing that people seem to forget. Like, the horses learn and they don't need to go in the same bit for the next 15 years. So.
Okay. We're just shuffling through these questions here.
A lot of them are just on bits.
Some of them we don't know when they were asked, and so you may have already covered some of this, but we're going to go ahead and ask.
I do see Caitlin McCollum asked, with a young horse, do you recommend a short shank, an O-ring, or question mark? So that brings up like a really interesting point on the cheek piece. I always tell people to ignore the cheek piece when we're talking about bitting your horse, because the mouthpiece is the thing that you have to worry about. The cheek piece really, Caitlin, is about your hands and what you're doing with your horse. I personally don't find a whole lot of use with any O-ring, especially if you're trying to train a young horse, because there is no more confusing cheek piece than this bit right here. The bit slides around in the bridle. The mouthpiece slides around on the rein slides around on the cheek. It's a hot mess. And this is really, an O-ring should be a horse that already knows its job. Like a Grand Prix dressage horse, this should be its bit. It's an inoffensive bit. They can lift the mouthpiece up off the tongue. They can get a fair amount of tongue freedom just from the cheek piece, being able to move the mouthpiece around. But if they're trying to figure out what you're trying to teach them, it is a super confusing tool. So that is the only thing I would say about the O-ring. But as far as like what to start a horse in, it's really about how you operate, like how your hands operate. If you ride with contact, you'd probably be better off with an egg, butter, and D, whether it's Western or English style. A shank bit is useful when you transition away from using tongue pressure. For example, And we sell a lot of this bit, so don't get me wrong, it's one of our most popular bits. But when you have any kind of broken bit in a shank, what you have is a tom thumb. So if this were a single joint, you would recognize it immediately as a tom thumb bit. And this bit, because it breaks and rotates down onto the tongue, like the single joint was never designed to be used in a shank bit. But at some point, somebody couldn't stop their horse, and they were like, hey, I'm going to take that one mouthpiece that really reefs on the tongue, and I'm going to add some leverage to it. And that's where you get your tom thumb from. The 04, because it has some tongue relief, can get away with it. But if you're starting a young horse, then you just have to be cognizant of the fact that you're applying tongue pressure, and when you add leverage, you are magnifying the pressure that you're applying to your horse's tongue. So as far as starting a young horse, I would say the 04 mouthpiece is going to be best in either a modified snaffle like the egg butt or the Western D. If you're a Western rider, this is an awesome starting bit. It's cute. It's really pretty. But you buckle the bridle here. You buckle the rein down here. You get the independent side movement. You add a curb strap here, just like I don't have one on this one, but just like we did on the English version with the chain, you can add a curb strap so you get curb pressure. And it's a really nice bit for helping a young horse figure out what's going on. Like it's very precise, it's very controlled, there's no sliding around, and you are using pressure points that are not the tongue. You're not with a ring bit, you're like on the tongue, that's all you can do. But with a cheek like this, a modified snaffle, you can use pull pressure, you can use curb pressure, bar lip pressure, and then tongue pressure and offer some tongue relief. And there's no reason to not do that, right? There's no reason to start a young horse just reefing on his tongue. To get that precision and teach him, that will keep him light and soft. So that's a really nice, either in the English or Western version, that's a really nice starting bit. And then the other one that's really nice is the combination bit, which is a little more intricate, but it's what I start all my horses in. It has, oh my gosh, so much metal. It has the nose band, the chin strap, and it's basically a ring bit, a hackmore, and a shank bit all in one. But you put the bit in the bridle, and you adjust the nose band and the chin strap so that they're snug but not tight. You can just get a pinky under. And when you pull back on the rein, there's a 1-inch slide here. So when you pull back on the rein, it rotates the cheek, and it gets the nose, chin, and pull pressure first, which are halter pressure points. And the mouthpiece will start moving if the horse doesn't come back to those halter pressure points. If he recognizes what's happening and he comes back to you, it relaxes. But if he doesn't, it hits a stop. And then this will just apply tongue pressure like any other level 1 or level 2 mouthpiece. So what the combination bit does for a young horse is it takes the focus off the mouth. And they're riding off the halter pressure points with your rein aid versus like right away riding off the tongue pressure. So I personally find the combination bit to be my best starting bit for any of my horses. And I use with the 04 mouthpiece. So it's the same mouthpiece as the, it's this little mouthpiece, but in the combination bit. I find it super useful, and it's very versatile, and you can use it for quite a while. Like you can get a lot of mileage out of it because the tongue is not, the mouth is not the focus. It's the chin pull and curb pressure that actually do the job. So.
What considerations do you need to look at when looking at cheek pieces, shank versus ring, etc.?
Yeah, so it goes back again to the rider's hands. So the question I always ask is, do you ride with contact or do you ride with a loose rein? And then ask your horse. So that's English and Western. So English, there's contact, there's tension in the rein, and then you just increase that tension when you want to ask for something. If you've been trained to ride two-handed with contact, then you're probably going to be better off with the modified snaffle ring. I'm never going to recommend a plain ring because I find them to be not very sophisticated, but either a ring or modified snaffle ring. If you are trained Western and you tend to ride with a loose rein and then you ask your horse, you're going to probably be better off with a shank. But the cheek piece is totally about the rider. The mouthpiece is for the horse. So worry not so much about the cheek piece and focus on that mouthpiece first. And then the cheek piece is whatever suits your hands and the sport that you're doing the best and will accomplish. And I prefer cheek pieces that keep everything in the right position, whether it's a full cheek with a hook where you can actually attach the post on the full cheek to the bridle, or it's a modified snaffle where you can buckle the bit into the bridle and buckle the rein onto the cheek where it's fixed. Or it's a shank bit, where you can fix the rein on the rein position for the shank. I prefer that level of control, and I find that I ride better with it, and that makes me happy. When I'm in a regular ring bit, I feel like I'm just driving without any, it's just chaos. I just don't understand what's happening. It feels crude and it feels primitive because all you can do is pull or not pull. And once you've had the sophistication of controlling the mouthpiece in the horse's mouth, then it's hard to go back from that. So really it's about you. And two-handed riding, I think somebody asked about that earlier and I forgot to address that. You can ride two-handed with any bit. You might train better for it with a shank bit where you have a little bit of leverage and don't have to work so hard. But at the end of the day, when a horse knows how to neck rein properly, it's not the bit that's making the neck rein. It's the rein that's that tells the horse, to cues the horse to neck rein and seat and legs. So you can neck rein and ride one-handed in any bit. You might have an easier time training them to it if you have either the modified snaffle cheek or the shank bit, because the bit's everything's fixed in place, than like a regular ring bit. But you can ride two-handed in just about anything. It's a psychological barrier that people think you have to have a shank bit to ride. One-handed, that you have to have a shank bit to ride one-handed. It's tradition more than it is actual necessity.
All right. Candace asked, bit recommendation for a 16-year-old horse starting to sort cows. Has been riding fine in a Myler level 3 long shank, sweet iron ported barrel, but this seems to be too much when sorting.
So this is where you really need to kind of get with Dale or Bob, because there's a lot of fine tuning in that information. So it's hard for a level 3 mouthpiece to be too much because there's no tongue pressure whatsoever. And if you're by too much, you mean the horse is overreacting or running through it or getting heavy in it or pushing on it, then what's probably happening is that there's no guidance in that mouthpiece. It's total freedom, and the horse is having a hard time understanding what you're asking. So it might be a case where in that particular sport, to do that particular activity, you'd have to back up and maybe look for a similar, like we do have in the correctionals, we'll have like the level 3 mouthpiece, and then in the correctional level 2, 3, we'll have one that is the similar shape. It just folds and collapses. And it's a stronger bit in terms of, yes, it will apply tongue pressure, but it also provides a lot more structure from you and a lot more guidance from you. And in that particular environment, your horse might really need that. But that's a really hard question to answer, like from a Facebook comment. So I would suggest just giving the Mylers a call and chatting about it with them, and then come back to Valley Vet and buy your bit. Get your gift with purchase that they will talk about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that this requires a little bit more. It's probably not that the bit is too much. It's probably that there's not enough there. It's just too much freedom. And the question, like it's an open-ended sentence and your horse is like, I need a period on the end of the sentence, please. And he's not getting it in that particular sport.
Okay, this one's from Julie. She says, any suggestions for a mouthpiece for a horse that likes to play, let's put my tongue over the bit? Do you think that this could be because of too much tongue pressure, that they are evading the mouthpiece? And she says teeth are checked and good.
Yeah, so probably is. So tongue over the bit is a really unfortunately common bit resistance. Usually it's in a single joint or French link or lozenge or a level 1 Myler mouthpiece. And it is definitely a reaction to excessive tongue pressure. The issue is, and I haven't really ever seen this corroborated by any science, but there's kind of an old horseman's adage that tongue over the bit, the pressure under the tongue releases endorphins that encourages the behavior, which would explain why tongue over the bit is really difficult to stop. If the horse has just started doing it and it's a new behavior, it's really recent, then a lot of times just addressing it by giving the horse some tongue relief with a slightly ported bit will take care of it. If the horse has been doing it for a really long time, months, years, and it's just like his go-to, and everybody thinks it's kind of cute and funny and weird, then the longer the horse has been doing it, the more it's become a learned behavior and the harder it is to fix. And you literally have to take a bit that has a port on it that physically keeps the tongue from going over the bit. It would usually be something along, like this is about a 1 inch high port. It would have to be something like at least this high to physically stop the tongue going over. And then it gives the horse a place to put the tongue under. But anything less than that is not going to break the habit. And so it is, again, I would go through the process of determining what level you think your horse is and where he falls in the whole needing tongue pressure, not needing tongue pressure, needs tongue relief. And then once you figured that out, look for a mouthpiece that fits the criteria, but is physically going to prevent him from putting his tongue over the bit. But it's going to be something like the 43 low port or the 33 or something like that, which, are nice soft mouthpieces. It's just, if your horse isn't really ready for that degree of freedom, then that there could be some fine tuning that needs to happen there.
We have a lot of good feedback here today.
Yeah.
And I see all the questions, so many questions.
They, some say they should have been taking notes.
What's
Don't
the beauty of this is you're going to keep it on your Facebook page and you can watch me yak for endlessly.
Watch it as many times as you need.
Is there a best way to get a hold of Dale and Bob?
You can email. And I can send you guys this as well if you want to add it to the comments on the video. But you can email Bob and Dale at mylerbitsusa@mylerbitsusa.com. And you can call them, but they recently changed over to a not toll-free number, and I can't reliably remember it off the top of my head because it was a recent change. But I can provide that for you guys. And
We'll get that information and add it. Yep.
Yep.
All right. Skim through these again and see if we missed anything. Pick up that one. All right. I think we've pretty well covered everything. If we missed you, put your question in there again.
Yeah, and we'll come back in. I see one of my cohorts from on the Myler Bits page is helping answer questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll pop in after the video's up, and if you have additional questions, we'll kind of go through and help answer any of the questions that you have. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well,
All right. We're going to draw our winner then.
yay. One lucky winner is going to get the Myler Bit of their choice, plus a consult with Dale Myler himself.
All right.
Pretty sweet
So the
prize.
winner for today is Jill Showalter.
Woohoo!
Hey, Jill. All right.
Congratulations, Jill. If you're still watching, go ahead and send us a private message to claim your prize.
All right. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. Judy, thank you so much for being with us and for answering all these questions. And then we have just a few announcements before we let you all go.
All right. Thank you, guys. It was great seeing you again.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for the questions.
All right, guys, before we get off here, we have our Classic Cash giveaway going on still. So this goes until July 14th. So get entered. There'll be 2 winners, and you each get $250 towards Classic Equine.
Join us next Wednesday. We're going to be live with All Flex talking about visual identification solutions. So join us then. That's all
Have
for
a
today.
great day.
Bye.
Bye.